Hi everyone, my name is Kelly Hale, and today I wanted to share some of my research findings with you. For my research project, I chose to compare the views of John Locke and Thomas Jefferson on the subject of slavery. Thomas Jefferson and John Locke were two of the most important men of the American Revolutionary time period. Although Locke lived almost 100 years before Jefferson, his ideas had a significant impact on the future president. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson quotes Locke almost verbatim when he says that all men are created equal and that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The combined thoughts of Jefferson and Locke have become an anthem for the oppressed people around the world, but recently historians have questioned the sincerity of their beliefs. Both men have been heavily criticized for their involvement with the slave trade. Although Locke never owned slaves, some historians credit him with being the author of the Fundamental Constitution of Carolina, a government charter which gave white men absolute control over their black slaves. By contrast, Jefferson owned over 600 slaves at the height of his career, and most likely had sexual relations with Sally Hemings, one of his female servants. In light of these facts, many historians have rightly questioned whether John Locke and Thomas Jefferson really believed that all men were created equal. The purpose of my paper was to compare the thoughts and writings of John Locke with Thomas Jefferson on the topic of slavery and black rights. After closely examining the evidence, I determined that both men believed that black men were entitled to the same God-given freedoms as white men had. Although Locke believed black and white men were equal in the state of nature, while Jefferson was less certain, both men viewed slavery as a moral evil. In 1689, Locke wrote the Two Treatises of Government to refute the writings of Sir Robert Filmer, a close ally of King James I and a strong proponent of the divine right of kings. Although his book was primarily focused on laying out his political philosophy, Locke also shared his thoughts on slavery. In the Two Treatises, Locke argues that slavery violated the law of nature. According to the philosopher, at the beginning of all time, all men existed in a state of perfect freedom, created by God, in which they could order their actions and dispose of their possessions and persons as they saw fit. God gave every man his independence and established natural laws to govern their behavior. The unalienable rights of man included life, liberty, health, and property. In Chapter 5 of the Treatises, Locke says that every man has a property in his own person and was entitled to keep the fruits of his labor. Based on these facts, Locke would have condemned the American slave system due to its hereditary nature and the unjust manner in which it was conducted. African slaves had not wronged Americans in any way, therefore Americans had no right to take them as captives. In a familiar fashion, Jefferson also believed that slavery was a fundamental violation of human rights. In his Notes on the State of Virginia, Jefferson recounted a plan that he supported which would have gradually emancipated the slaves, given adult slaves an education, and provided a way for them to be shipped back to Africa. In his writings, Jefferson almost always spoke negatively of the slave trade, referring to it as a blot on humanity and a practice of the most unremitting despotism. Although both men agreed that slavery was a moral wrong, Locke was more willing to acknowledge the commonalities between black and white men. In his essay concerning human understanding, Locke wrote that men were tabula rasas, or blank slates, and that no one was born with innate knowledge that made them better than anyone else. By contrast, Jefferson seriously questioned whether black men were from the same line of humanity that white men were, saying, "I advance it therefore as a suspicion only that the blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstances, are inferior to the whites in the endowments both of body and mind." In light of all that has been said, how should we view these men? Did they actually believe that all men were created equal? I would argue that they did, even if their personal decisions didn't always line up with their beliefs. Both were strong advocates for human liberty, even if they themselves could not bring about it on their own. And while slavery continued after both men died, the ideas that they helped to develop played an important role in its downfall. Thanks for listening and have a great day.